In the farthest corners of the galaxy, far beyond the well-mapped star systems and imperial spaceports, a small group of humans existed that no one had ever recorded. They were explorers, adventurers, and survivalists all rolled into one. The Galactic Empire, with its endless bureaucracy, star charts, and records, had never noticed them. On official maps, they didn't exist. To the Empire, they were nothing more than whispers of old legends, like stories told to scare children about the vast unknown. But in reality, they were real and they were alive and ready to prove their strength. These humans were not part of any government or organization. They didn't have official identification numbers, fleet registrations, or even a proper home planet that could be traced. They lived on the edges in places too small, too remote, or too strange for the Empire to bother with. Their ships were few and modest, nothing compared to the massive warships that patrolled imperial space. Yet what they lacked in size and firepower, they more than made up for in determination, ingenuity, and courage. Every member of their crew had a reason to be there. Some were scientists curious about the universe. Others were engineers, inventors, or ex-soldiers seeking a life away from imperial control. But all shared a common goal: survival and exploration in a galaxy that did not notice them. The crew had learned early on that being invisible was both a blessing and a curse. They could move without being tracked, explore systems without alarms, and live freely. No imperial officers ever knocked on their doors or demanded their identification. Yet, this invisibility also meant that help was never coming if things went wrong. If a ship broke down or a star system turned out to be dangerous, they were completely on their own. Every decision carried risk, and every choice could mean life or death. But the crew embraced this freedom. They thrived in it. They had to. Their ships, while modest, were marvels of human creativity. Each vessel was built, repaired, and upgraded with hands-on skill and careful thought. They didn't have access to imperial technology, so they had to rely on clever designs, hidden compartments, and unconventional propulsion systems. Every engine, shield, and weapon system had been modified to maximize efficiency while staying small and stealthy. Their fleet was a patchwork of old and new, of borrowed parts and custom builds. Yet it worked. And it worked brilliantly. The humans' ability to adapt quickly to any situation gave them an edge no one expected, especially an enemy that thought power lay in sheer numbers and size. Life among these humans was also defined by community. Everyone had a role and everyone had a responsibility. Trust was not just a virtue, it was survival. The crew lived closely together, sharing spaces no larger than a few rooms in some cases, but their bond was strong. They celebrated small victories, like fixing a failing engine or discovering a safe planet for refueling. And they mourned losses quietly, knowing that dwelling on fear would only make them weaker. They learned to read each other's expressions, anticipate actions, and communicate silently when necessary. Every member of the crew knew that, out here in the invisible corners of the galaxy, mistakes were costly and cooperation was everything. Even with all their precautions, the humans had a certain thrill in being unseen. They could watch the Empire's massive fleets move through space without being noticed. They could witness grand battles and conflicts in distant sectors without intervention. To outsiders, it might have seemed like hiding, like fear, but in truth, it was a calculated choice. Remaining invisible allowed them to grow, learn, and prepare for something bigger. They were like shadows in the night, silent, observant, and patient. And patience would be their secret weapon. The galaxy itself was a vast, beautiful, and often dangerous place. Nebulas glowed like oceans of color, asteroid belts floated silently in the void, and rogue planets drifted without stars. The humans explored all of it, often finding strange life forms, rare minerals, and mysterious ruins left by civilizations long gone. Each discovery strengthened their knowledge, their skills, and their confidence. They learned to adapt to extreme conditions. Frozen planets where engines froze, volcanic worlds where heat melted metal, and radiation zones that would have killed any ordinary crew. Over time, their reputation grew, not among the Empire, which still had no record of them, but among themselves. They understood that survival was more than luck. It was preparation, skill, and courage. Despite all this, the humans were not perfect. They argued, they made mistakes, and sometimes their confidence led them into dangerous situations. But every challenge only made them smarter, faster, and more prepared for what lay ahead. They had no guidance from the Empire, no instructions, and no safety nets. Everything depended on them. And this made them strong in a way that large, powerful fleets controlled by bureaucrats could never understand. In the end, the Invisible Ones were a paradox. Small but mighty, unnoticed but formidable ordinary humans who had learned to survive in extraordinary ways. The Galactic Empire may have had its massive fleets, its extensive records, and its authority, but the humans had something that no imperial database could ever measure: ingenuity, courage, and the freedom that came from being invisible. And though the Empire did not know it yet, these invisible humans were about to change everything. Life had always been unpredictable for the invisible human crew, but they thrived on it. Every day brought a new challenge, a new world to explore, or a new problem to solve. They were experts in the art of survival, careful planners, and fearless adventurers. Yet, nothing could have prepared them for the day they first discovered a threat coming their way. A threat that belonged to a force far larger, more powerful, and far more organized than anything they had encountered before: the Galactic Empire. It started with subtle warnings, almost imperceptible at first. The crew was scanning nearby star systems, mapping potential resource-rich planets, when their sensors picked up unusual energy readings. Massive ships, unlike anything they had seen, were moving deliberately through space. These ships didn't belong to any group they had ever heard of. They were fast, precise, and heavily armored. At first, the humans hesitated. Should they approach? Should they retreat? The Empire was known for ruthlessness, and encountering a fleet of this scale was dangerous. But curiosity, tempered by caution, guided them. They observed quietly, keeping their distance, hiding in asteroid belts and behind unlit planets. As they watched, it became clear that these ships were not simply passing through. They were hunting. The fleet moved in tight formation, scanning star systems methodically as if searching for something or someone. The humans quickly realized the terrifying truth. The Empire had no record of them, yet it was sending its mightiest forces toward their sector. No official notice, no warnings in interstellar databases, not even a hint in galactic records. It was as if the humans didn't exist, and yet, the Empire acted as if they were the most dangerous threat in the galaxy. The crew felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. They were invisible to the Empire's records, but the fleet's presence made it clear that their anonymity was not enough. This was a test, a challenge, and possibly a battle that could determine the fate of their small, unrecorded group. The humans began preparing immediately, knowing that hesitation could mean disaster. They gathered in the command room, studying every piece of data they could find on the approaching fleet. They analyzed ship formations, energy readings, and patterns of movement, trying to predict the Empire's next steps. Every detail mattered because in space, mistakes were fatal. The discovery also forced the humans to reflect on their uniqueness. For years, they had lived on the fringes of the galaxy, unnoticed, free to explore and experiment. They had adapted to harsh planets, strange phenomena, and unpredictable dangers, honing skills that no ordinary crew could match. But now, they faced an enemy that was organized, disciplined, and deadly. The Empire did not make mistakes easily, and its fleets were known for efficiency and power. The humans understood that brute force alone would not win this encounter. They would need intelligence, strategy, and creativity, the very qualities that had kept them alive so far. While the fleet approached, the humans worked tirelessly to prepare. They reinforced their ships, checked engines and shields, and ensured that every weapon system was functioning. Unlike the Empire, they had no centralized command or enormous resources. Every improvement was the result of human skill, ingenuity, and teamwork. They adapted tools from old technology, modified engines for speed, and created stealth mechanisms that could hide them from sensors. Every member of the crew had a role. Engineers fine-tuned the systems, navigators plotted evasive routes, and pilots trained for maneuvers that could confuse or outsmart a far larger enemy. Yet the humans also understood the psychological side of the threat. The Empire, though enormous and intimidating, relied on assumptions. It assumed that any unrecorded humans would be weak, unprepared, and easily defeated. The crew decided to use this assumption to their advantage. If the Empire thought of them as invisible and insignificant, it might underestimate their abilities, and that underestimation could turn into their greatest weapon. Days passed as the fleet drew nearer, each moment filled with tension and anticipation. The humans watched from hiding, studying every detail of the Imperial ship's movements. They learned quickly, observing the formation of the enemy, the signals exchanged between ships, and the patterns of energy bursts from weapon systems. Slowly, they began to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the fleet. They realized that while the Empire had power, it lacked flexibility. Its ships were massive, difficult to maneuver, and dependent on rigid coordination. This rigidity was something the humans could exploit, turning their small size and speed into an advantage. At the same time, the crew felt the weight of responsibility. They were not just protecting themselves. They were defending their way of life, the freedom of being unseen, and the very idea that humans could survive without Imperial control. Each crew member prepared mentally for what lay ahead. The fear was real, but it was coupled with determination. They knew that being discovered by the Empire was dangerous, but it was also an opportunity to prove that skill, courage, and teamwork could triumph over brute force. The humans realized that this encounter would change everything. It was not just about avoiding destruction. It was about showing that a small, resourceful group could stand up to one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Every plan they made, every precaution they took, and every innovation they implemented brought them closer to turning fear into power. By the time the fleet reached their sector, the humans were ready, not just to survive, but to fight back in ways the Empire would never anticipate. In the end, the discovery of the fleet was more than just a warning. It was the moment that transformed the humans from invisible wanderers into active participants in a galactic struggle. They had been living unnoticed, free to explore and survive, but now they were seen, though the Empire still did not understand who or what it was facing. And in that uncertainty lay the humans' greatest strength. The ability to strike from the shadows, using intelligence, preparation, and courage to confront a threat far larger than themselves. The moment the humans realized that the Imperial fleet was approaching, the crew knew that careful planning would determine their survival. Unlike the Empire, they had no massive numbers, no powerful weapons, and no official authority to rely on. What they did have, however, was intelligence, creativity, and unity. Every member of the crew understood that preparation was everything. In space, even a small mistake could be fatal, and they had no luxury of backup fleets or reinforcements. This challenge would test not only their skills but their ability to think faster than an enemy who had never even noticed them before. They began by analyzing everything they knew about the incoming fleet. Sensors scanned the approaching ships constantly, recording their formations, movements, energy signatures, and communication signals. The humans noticed patterns. The Empire's ships were organized but rigid, heavily armored but slow to respond to unexpected maneuvers. They realized that their own advantage lay in speed, unpredictability, and the element of surprise. Unlike the Empire, they could change direction in seconds, hide in asteroid belts, or vanish in nebulae. Using these advantages required careful planning, and the crew set to work immediately. The preparation was not just about weapons or shields, it was about thinking creatively. They modified their ships to be as stealthy as possible, covering them with reflective panels, cloaking devices, and noise-canceling engines. They installed hidden compartments for emergency equipment and created diversion tools, like drones that could imitate ship signatures to confuse enemy sensors. Even small systems were upgraded. Engines were tweaked for bursts of speed, navigation tools programmed for unpredictable maneuvers, and communication systems hardened to prevent interception. Every detail mattered, because in a battle against an enemy who expected no resistance, small advantages could make the difference between survival and annihilation. The crew also focused on strategy beyond technology. They held meetings in the command room, where every idea was considered. Engineers suggested modifications, pilots discussed evasive patterns, and strategists analyzed possible enemy tactics. Even the youngest members of the crew were encouraged to contribute. Sometimes the most creative ideas came from unexpected sources. They simulated attacks, rehearsed scenarios, and practiced responses to hypothetical ambushes. The goal was to be ready for any situation, to anticipate the enemy before the enemy even noticed them. Training became intense. Pilots practiced maneuvers repeatedly, learning to fly through asteroid fields at incredible speeds without collision, and to use gravitational pulls of planets for sudden bursts of momentum. They ran drills to simulate attacks on their own ships so that if the Empire tried an ambush, the crew could respond instinctively. Engineers and weapon specialists worked side by side to ensure that every laser, missile, or energy shield could be activated without delay. Even the medical staff trained to handle injuries quickly, because in space, a small wound could become life-threatening in minutes. Every human on board was part of the preparation, and every action was tied to survival. While technology and training were crucial, morale was equally important. The humans knew that fear could paralyze them faster than any enemy weapon. They held gatherings to discuss their progress, shared stories of past successes, and reminded each other why they were fighting. Courage was not just about facing the Empire. It was about trusting each other in life-or-death situations. Bonds strengthened as the crew spent long hours together, laughing, debating, and supporting one another. They understood that even the most brilliant plan would fail if fear or doubt entered their ranks. The crew also studied the psychological aspect of the battle. They knew the Empire had never encountered humans like them before. The fleet's commanders assumed that any unknown life forms would be weak, disorganized, or simple to eliminate. The humans decided to turn this assumption into a weapon. If the enemy expected them to be small and powerless, then striking unpredictably would cause panic, confusion, and mistakes. Preparation, therefore, was not only technical but also strategic. They planned traps, ambushes, and feints designed to mislead and intimidate the enemy. The humans would use their invisibility in records to their full advantage, appearing and disappearing when least expected. Meanwhile, the tension was constant. Days turned into nights, though time and space was a blur. Every crew member remained vigilant, monitoring sensors, running drills, and checking equipment. There was no room for error, and everyone knew it. Yet, the humans did not succumb to despair. Instead, they thrived under pressure, finding excitement in problem-solving and confidence in teamwork. They understood that preparation was not just about surviving the enemy. It was about proving that humans could overcome obstacles far larger than themselves. Finally, as the fleet drew closer, the humans completed their preparations. Ships were fully upgraded, systems checked, and crew members trained to perfection. Their plan was ready. They would use stealth, intelligence, and unexpected maneuvers to level the playing field against the far larger Imperial fleet. Every detail had been considered, every contingency planned, and every human ready to act without hesitation. For the first time, they realized that preparation alone gave them power. The Empire may have been vast, but the humans' ingenuity and courage made them formidable. The day of confrontation had not yet arrived, but the invisible humans were no longer merely surviving. They were ready to take control of their fate. They had transformed fear into strategy, limitations into advantages, and uncertainty into opportunity. The Empire, powerful and unknowing, was approaching a force it had never recorded, a crew that could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast them. The stage was set, and the humans stood at the edge of history, invisible to records but fully prepared to make their presence unforgettable. The day of the first encounter finally arrived, and the invisible human crew felt a mixture of tension, excitement, and determination. After days of preparation, studying the Imperial fleet, and training relentlessly, they were ready to face the enemy for the first time. Despite their small numbers and modest ships, they carried confidence in their planning, ingenuity, and unity. For the first time, the humans would move from hiding to action, testing whether their strategies could withstand the might of a fleet that the galaxy's records had never acknowledged. The Imperial fleet was enormous. Ships of all sizes moved in perfect formation, each vessel bristling with weapons and defenses. Their sheer scale was intimidating, and even from a distance, the humans could feel the weight of their power. But the crew remained calm, knowing that size alone did not guarantee victory. While the Empire relied on overwhelming firepower, the humans depended on speed, precision, and unpredictability. They had spent months learning to exploit the enemy's rigidity, and now it was time to put their plans into action. The first encounter began quietly. The humans stayed hidden behind an asteroid belt, their sensors tracking every Imperial movement. The enemy ships scanned the area, unaware of the human fleet lurking in shadows. Then, without warning, the humans struck. Small fighter ships darted from cover, targeting the weakest Imperial vessels first. Lasers flashed, shields flared, and explosions lit up the darkness of space. The attack was sudden, precise, and disorienting. The Empire had never faced an enemy that moved like this, fast, invisible, and unpredictable. The humans used every advantage they had. Some ships created decoys, projecting false energy signals to mislead enemy sensors. Others used the gravity of nearby planets to slingshot into attack positions at impossible speeds. Pilots executed maneuvers that seemed reckless but were perfectly calculated, hitting targets from unexpected angles and disappearing before counterattacks could be mounted. The first blows stunned the Empire, which had assumed that any unknown humans would be easy prey. Instead, they were facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. As the battle intensified, the humans demonstrated not just skill but intelligence. They focused on disabling key systems on enemy ships, targeting communication arrays, propulsion engines, and weapon controls. Their goal was not to destroy everything immediately but to create confusion and weaken the fleet systematically. Each Imperial ship that faltered added to the chaos, and the humans adapted continuously, changing tactics to exploit new weaknesses. The Empire had never encountered an adversary that combined clever strategy with perfect execution. Every member of the human crew played a role in the battle. Engineers monitored shields and repaired minor damages instantly, keeping ships operational even under fire. Pilots performed daring maneuvers that would have been impossible for larger, less agile ships. Strategists coordinated attacks, predicting the enemy's moves and redirecting human ships accordingly. Even those who weren't on the front lines contributed by managing communications, tracking enemy positions, and ensuring that each maneuver was timed to perfection. Unity and trust were essential. One mistake could cost lives and compromise the entire operation. The Empire was confused and frustrated. Their fleet commanders shouted orders that were impossible to follow, as human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Attempts to regroup often failed because the humans exploited every gap, every weakness, and every predictable pattern. The enormous power of the Empire's ships became a disadvantage in many ways. They could not react quickly, and their size made them easy targets for the smaller, faster human vessels. It became clear that the Empire had underestimated this unrecorded human force. Even in the chaos of battle, the humans remained disciplined. They avoided unnecessary risks, concentrated on strategic targets, and communicated silently when needed. The first encounter tested every skill they had practiced: stealth, speed, intelligence, and teamwork. Each strike was measured, each retreat calculated, and each opportunity seized with precision. The humans were small, but they were formidable. For the first time, the Empire experienced the shock of facing an enemy that refused to follow the rules it expected. As the fight continued, the initial shock for the Empire grew into fear. Ships that had once seemed invincible were disabled, caught off guard by tactics no Imperial commander could have imagined. Pilots tried to counterattack, but human ships were gone before they could respond effectively. Explosions lit up the void, echoing the collapse of rigid formations. Every victory, small or large, strengthened the humans' confidence, proving that preparation, intelligence, and courage could overcome even overwhelming odds. The first encounter also taught the humans valuable lessons. They learned how the Empire would react under pressure, which ships were vulnerable, and which strategies worked best against the enemy's formations. Every engagement, every maneuver, every decision added to their knowledge. They realized that they could survive, even thrive, against a foe far stronger than themselves, as long as they remained united and clever. By the end of the battle, the humans had achieved more than survival. They had shown the Empire that a force not recorded in their databases could still strike decisively, creating fear and confusion. Though the engagement was just the beginning, it was a turning point. The invisible humans had revealed themselves in the most undeniable way possible, through skill, strategy, and courage. For the first time, the Empire could not ignore them, and the humans had proved that being small and unseen did not mean being powerless. The first encounter ended with the humans retreating to safety, regrouping and repairing minor damages. They had tested their abilities, learned from the enemy, and demonstrated that preparation and teamwork could turn the tide against even the most formidable foe. Though the battle had been intense, it had also been a victory in spirit and strategy, setting the stage for larger confrontations yet to come. The invisible humans were no longer simply survivors. They were a force the Empire could no longer overlook, a reminder that intelligence, courage, and unity could overcome even the greatest power in the galaxy. The first encounter had shocked the Galactic Empire, and the invisible humans had survived their first test. But surviving was not enough. They needed to turn the battle in their favor. They had demonstrated skill and precision, but now it was time to take control and show that even a small, unrecorded force could defeat a massive, disciplined fleet. Every member of the crew understood the stakes. The Empire was powerful, organized, and relentless. Yet, the humans had something far more unpredictable: intelligence, creativity, and unity. This combination would allow them to shift the battle from survival to victory. The crew quickly analyzed the results of the initial skirmish. Sensors recorded every explosion, every ship disabled, and every reaction from the enemy. They studied the Empire's patterns, noting where commanders hesitated, where formations were weakest, and where miscommunications occurred. These details were invaluable. The humans realized that the Empire, though powerful, was predictable in many ways. Their rigid hierarchy, dependence on large ships, and structured formations made them vulnerable to unconventional tactics. This insight became the foundation for the humans' plan to turn the tide. The strategy was simple in concept but difficult in execution. Instead of fighting every ship head-on, the humans focused on disruption. Small teams would isolate sections of the fleet, disable key vessels, and create confusion. Drones and decoys were used to mislead sensors, making it appear as if the humans were attacking from multiple directions at once. The Empire, with its enormous ships and strict coordination, struggled to respond. What should have been strength, size, power, and numbers was turning into a liability. The humans were nimble, unpredictable, and adaptive, and this gave them an edge that no Imperial commander anticipated. Every crew member had a role in the operation. Pilots practiced coordinated maneuvers, racing through asteroid belts, skimming past planets, and exploiting gravitational forces to appear suddenly in enemy blind spots. Engineers monitored the ship systems, adjusting shields, engines, and weapons to ensure maximum efficiency. Strategists calculated attack angles, timing, and sequence to keep the Empire off balance. Even medical personnel prepared for injuries that might occur in unexpected skirmishes. The humans had learned from the first encounter, and now every movement was sharper, faster, and more precise. The turning point came when they executed their first major disruption. A small strike team targeted the lead ships in one of the Imperial wings. Using stealth, they disabled engines and communication systems without firing traditional weapons. The Empire's commanders were stunned. Ships drifted helplessly, unable to maneuver or coordinate, while the humans struck from other angles, hitting targets that were assumed safe. The sudden disruption spread confusion throughout the fleet. Pilots miscommunicated, formations broke down, and a sense of panic began to take hold. The humans had shifted the balance of power using strategy rather than brute force. The Empire tried to respond, but every attempt to regroup was anticipated by the humans. They adapted quickly, changing tactics in real time. If the enemy concentrated on one area, humans attacked another. If a ship attempted to escape, a fast squadron intercepted it. Every move was calculated, exploiting the Empire's weaknesses while minimizing their own risk. The humans were no longer reacting, they were leading the fight. The invisible force that had once avoided detection was now the orchestrator of the battlefield. Psychology played a critical role. The Empire had always relied on fear and intimidation, assuming that no unrecorded group could challenge its authority. The humans turned this assumption against them. By striking unpredictably and targeting critical points, they created a sense of vulnerability. Ships that once seemed indestructible now appeared fragile, and commanders who were accustomed to control felt powerless. Panic spread faster than any weapon could move, and the humans used this fear to their advantage. Chaos multiplied, and the Empire, despite its size and power, struggled to maintain order. Even as the battle intensified, the humans remained disciplined. They avoided reckless attacks that could expose them to danger. Every strike was measured, every maneuver calculated. The crew communicated silently, anticipating each other's actions without delay. Their unity, trust, and coordination amplified their small numbers, turning what seemed like a disadvantage into a formidable strength. They understood that intelligence, courage, and teamwork could overcome overwhelming power, and they applied this principle in every moment of the fight. The results were remarkable. Imperial ships that had once dominated systems fell one by one. Key vessels were disabled, supply lines disrupted, and the fleet's organization crumbled. The humans' ability to control the pace and direction of the battle forced the Empire into constant defensive maneuvers. What began as a skirmish had become a strategic offensive led by the unrecorded human crew. Every action, every successful maneuver, strengthened their confidence and demonstrated that the tide could indeed be turned. By the end of the engagement, it was clear that the humans were no longer passive or merely surviving. They had become a dominant force in the battlefield, using intelligence, preparation, and daring to control outcomes far beyond what their size would suggest. The Empire, massive and powerful, was now reacting to a force it had assumed was inconsequential. The humans had turned fear into opportunity, uncertainty into advantage, and chaos into victory. The turning of the tide also taught the humans a critical lesson. Power is not always measured in size or numbers. Strategy, adaptability, and unity can overcome even the greatest odds. The Empire may have had fleets, technology, and bureaucracy, but the humans had courage, intelligence, and determination. These qualities allowed them to move from a defensive position into control of the battle, setting the stage for even greater victories in the conflicts yet to come. As the crew regrouped, repaired minor damages, and planned the next move, there was a sense of accomplishment mixed with anticipation. They had proven that even a small, invisible force could challenge one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. The humans were no longer just survivors, they were active participants shaping the outcome of the fight. The tide had turned, and the Empire had no choice but to face a new reality. The invisible humans were a force to be reckoned with, and their fight was far from over. The human crew had done the impossible. They had survived the initial encounter, outsmarted the Imperial fleet, and even turned the tide in their favor. Yet, the Empire, with all its power, bureaucracy, and resources, had never faced such an unpredictable force. As the humans continued their strategic assaults, a wave of panic began to spread throughout the Imperial command. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly, but soon it consumed the officers, captains, and entire fleets. The Empire was massive, organized, and feared across the galaxy. But none of that mattered when uncertainty took hold. The first signs of panic were subtle. Reports of disabled ships, unexplained maneuvers, and missing vessels flooded the Imperial communication network. Commanders repeated orders, only to discover that their own fleets were no longer responding in the expected way. Pilots hesitated before acting, unsure of where the next attack would come from. In previous battles, the Empire had relied on strict formations, large numbers, and advanced weaponry to overwhelm opponents. These methods had always worked. But against humans who were invisible in the records, clever, and unpredictable, these advantages suddenly became liabilities. The humans, meanwhile, maintained their calm. They had anticipated this reaction. Their goal was not merely to survive the encounter. It was to destabilize the Empire and demonstrate that the invisible force it had ignored could not only defend itself but also dominate. Each strike, each tactical maneuver, was designed to exploit the rigidity of the enemy's structure. The Empire's ships were massive and difficult to maneuver, relying heavily on coordination and predictable formations. When those formations broke under unexpected assaults, confusion spread like wildfire. The humans used this opportunity to intensify their attacks, moving faster than the enemy could comprehend, hitting targets at unexpected angles, and vanishing before counterattacks could be mounted. Panic quickly escalated as key ships were disabled or destroyed. Imperial commanders were stunned by the precision and intelligence of the human attacks. Fleets that had once operated with near-perfect discipline now drifted aimlessly, their coordination shattered. Communication lines were jammed, sensors misled by decoys, and fear took root among the crew. Even the Empire's most experienced officers could not understand what they were facing. They had assumed humans would be weak and easily defeated. They had no records of this force, no intelligence reports to prepare them, and no understanding of the strategies being used against them. For the first time in their history, the Empire was unsure of itself. As panic spread, mistakes multiplied. Ships moved incorrectly, leaving themselves vulnerable to attack. Orders were misinterpreted or delayed, creating gaps in defensive lines. Some commanders attempted to retreat, only to run into human ambushes they had not anticipated. Fear grew faster than the humans could strike, and the larger the fleet, the more chaos erupted. The Empire's greatest strength, the sheer size and discipline of its fleets, had turned into its weakness. In their confusion, they could not predict the actions of a small, intelligent, and invisible adversary. The humans understood the power of this psychological warfare. While they had already proven their skill in battle, they also knew that fear could be more damaging than any weapon. By remaining calm, precise, and coordinated, they amplified the Empire's panic. Every unexpected maneuver, every sudden attack, and every ship that vanished without a trace made the enemy question their competence. Panic was contagious, and once it spread to one part of the fleet, it rippled across the entire command structure. Suddenly, a force that had once seemed unstoppable was in disarray. The crew of the human fleet continued to exploit the situation. Small strike teams targeted the most crucial ships, flagships, communication vessels, and command centers, while larger groups focused on creating diversions. They forced the Empire to react rather than act, dictating the flow of the battle. Every movement was calculated to increase fear and confusion. By striking unpredictably, they maintained the upper hand, demonstrating that strategy, intelligence, and unity could overcome raw power. The Empire, which relied on control and certainty, was completely unprepared for an opponent that refused to play by the expected rules. The psychological toll on the Empire's commanders was profound. They had grown accustomed to obedience and coordination. They were trained to trust the precision of their fleets and the predictability of their strategies. Facing humans who were invisible in the records, highly intelligent, and daringly unpredictable, many began to doubt their own judgment. Decisions were delayed, opportunities missed, and fear dictated choices that would normally have been rational. The humans had not only challenged their fleets physically but had shattered the confidence of the Empire itself. Even as panic spread, the humans remained disciplined. They did not allow arrogance, overconfidence, or exhaustion to cloud their judgment. Every maneuver was purposeful, every attack measured. They had trained for this moment and understood that exploiting panic was as important as destroying ships. By staying focused and coordinated, they could maintain control over the battle while the Empire's command struggled to regain order. Their invisibility in official records had become a tool of power. They were unknown, uncounted, and therefore unpredictable. The climax of the panic came when multiple Imperial ships were destroyed in rapid succession. Leaders who had assumed total control now found themselves powerless, watching as their carefully constructed formations disintegrated. Reports of missing ships, destroyed fleets, and sudden attacks created chaos at every level of command. The Empire's confidence, built over centuries, crumbled under the pressure of a force it had ignored. The humans had achieved what few believed possible. They had turned fear into a weapon and had forced the Empire to react instead of act. By the end of the encounter, the Empire was no longer the unshakable force it had once seemed. Panic had crippled their ability to fight effectively. Their fleet was disorganized, morale was low, and their commanders were unsure how to proceed. Meanwhile, the human crew had not only survived but had strengthened their position, learning more about the enemy's weaknesses and solidifying their control over the battle. They had demonstrated that courage, intelligence, and unity could overwhelm even the most formidable opponent. The human crew emerged from the encounter not just as survivors but as a dominant, invisible force. The Empire had panicked, and in that panic the humans had proven their power. They had shown that being small and unrecorded did not mean being powerless. Instead, it meant they could strike unexpectedly, exploit weaknesses, and turn fear into an advantage. The stage was now set for the next phase. A decisive confrontation that could destroy the Empire's fleet entirely, proving once and for all that the invisible humans were a force to be reckoned with. After days of careful observation, preparation, and skirmishes, the human crew knew that the time had come for the final assault. The Empire's fleet had been shaken by their previous encounters. Panic and confusion were spreading among the enemy ranks. The humans had turned fear into their ally, but now they needed a decisive victory to prove once and for all that a force invisible to records could destroy the mightiest ships of the Galactic Empire. Every crew member understood the stakes. This was no longer about survival alone. It was about demonstrating the power of intelligence, strategy, and unity against overwhelming odds. The human fleet moved silently through the dark expanse of space. Their ships, small but highly maneuverable, glided like shadows between stars and asteroids, staying hidden from Imperial sensors. Every ship was positioned for maximum effect. Pilots knew exactly when to strike, which targets to focus on, and how to support one another. Engineers monitored every system, ready to respond instantly to any damage. Weapons were armed, shields reinforced, and communications tightly coordinated. The humans had become a single, unified entity, each person a vital part of a larger strategy, and every move carefully planned to achieve the greatest impact. The first phase of the assault began with stealth. Small squadrons of human ships darted in and out of asteroid fields, firing at key Imperial vessels to disable engines and communications without engaging in full-scale combat. This created confusion among the enemy fleet, which had grown accustomed to reacting to human movements. Now, the humans dictated the terms of the battle. Each strike was precise, minimizing risk while maximizing disruption. Imperial ships that had once been symbols of unstoppable power now drifted helplessly, their formations broken, their command compromised. The humans exploited every weakness, using agility and surprise to their full advantage. Once the Empire's fleet was destabilized, the humans launched the second phase of the assault, a coordinated offensive targeting the most powerful ships. Flagships and command vessels were the main focus. Disabling these ships would further cripple the Empire's ability to coordinate, making the remaining vessels easier targets. Human pilots moved with perfect timing, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the enemy could retaliate. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, sending shockwaves through the ranks and intensifying panic. Each successful strike reinforced the humans' confidence and weakened the Empire's morale. The humans also used advanced diversion tactics. Drones, holographic decoys, and false energy signatures created the illusion of larger fleets attacking from multiple directions. The Empire, already reeling from earlier encounters, struggled to respond effectively. Commanders gave contradictory orders, ships collided or drifted off course, and every misstep played into the humans' hands. By combining strategy, deception, and precise strikes, the humans ensured that the Empire's power could not be brought to bear against them all at once. Each move was calculated, and each advantage was exploited to its fullest. Even under the pressure of the final assault, the humans remained disciplined. They communicated silently, anticipated each other's actions, and avoided unnecessary risks. Every crew member knew their role, and trust within the fleet was absolute. Engineers repaired minor damages on the fly, Pilots executed daring maneuvers without hesitation, and strategists continuously adapted the plan to new developments. This unity allowed them to maintain control of the battle, despite facing enemies far larger and more powerful. Where the Empire panicked and hesitated, the humans acted decisively and precisely. The climax of the final assault came as the humans focused on the last remaining Imperial vessels. The largest warships, once thought invincible, now became vulnerable targets. Coordinated attacks disabled their shields, destroyed weapon systems, and immobilized engines. Pilots executed maneuvers that no one had expected, striking from blind spots and using gravitational forces to amplify their attacks. Each explosion, each disabled ship, reinforced the human superiority in strategy, agility, and ingenuity. The Empire's fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, was now reduced to a fragmented, powerless force. Psychological warfare played a key role throughout the assault. The Empire's leaders, already shaken by prior encounters, watched as their most powerful ships were systematically destroyed. Fear and uncertainty dominated their decisions. They could no longer trust their sensors, their formations, or even their own judgment. The humans, invisible to the Empire's records, had used their unpredictability and intelligence to turn the mightiest fleet into chaos. By the end of the assault, the Empire's morale had collapsed completely, leaving the humans as the clear victors. Victory was not just about destruction, it was about proving a point. The humans had demonstrated that size, technology, and records could not define power. Intelligence, preparation, and unity were equally, if not more, important. The final assault had shattered the Empire's confidence, leaving a clear message across the galaxy. The invisible humans were not to be underestimated. They were capable, resourceful, and unstoppable when working together. After the battle, the human fleet regrouped to assess the situation and repair minor damages. Though exhausted, every crew member felt the satisfaction of accomplishment. They had turned preparation, strategy, and courage into decisive victory. The Empire, with all its resources, had been defeated by a small, unrecorded force that had relied on intelligence, ingenuity, and teamwork. The human crew had not only survived, they had conquered. The final assault also changed how the humans viewed themselves. They had always known that their invisibility in the Empire's records was a kind of freedom, a chance to operate without interference. But now, they realized that their true power lay in preparation, strategy, and the unity of their crew. By thinking creatively, acting decisively, and trusting one another, they had achieved the impossible. They had taken on the most powerful fleet in the galaxy and emerged victorious. As they left the battlefield, the humans understood the significance of their victory. The Empire would remember this day, and word of the invisible humans who destroyed its fleet would spread far and wide. But for the crew, it was not about fame or recognition. It was about survival, courage, and proving that intelligence and unity could overcome even the greatest power. They had turned fear into advantage, unpredictability into strength, and invisibility into dominance. The final assault had not only won the battle, it had cemented their place as a force to be reckoned with in the galaxy. The victory was complete. The Empire's fleet was shattered, its commanders panicked and demoralized, and the humans had proven their skill beyond doubt. They had accomplished what many thought impossible, defeating a fleet far larger, stronger, and more organized than themselves. The final assault was a testament to preparation, intelligence, and unity, showing that even the smallest, invisible force could change the course of history in the galaxy. The battle was over, and the human crew had achieved the impossible. The Galactic Empire, with all its resources, ships, and commanders, had been defeated. The once mighty fleet lay in ruins, scattered across the darkness of space, and the humans who had been invisible to records had proven themselves more than capable of challenging even the greatest power in the galaxy. But victory brought more than relief. It brought reflection, responsibility, and a new understanding of their place in the universe. Immediately after the battle, the crew set to work assessing damage and repairing their ships. Though their losses had been minimal, the intensity of the final assault had left some systems stressed, engines worn, and shields weakened. Engineers worked tirelessly, moving through narrow corridors and cramped control rooms, ensuring that every ship was ready for whatever came next. Pilots ran diagnostic maneuvers, confirming that navigation systems were accurate and weapons were fully operational. The human fleet, though smaller than the Empire's, operated like a well-oiled machine, each member playing a critical role in restoring efficiency and readiness. Beyond repairs, the crew also focused on understanding the impact of their victory. They reviewed data collected during the battle, the tactics that worked, the weaknesses they had exploited, and the mistakes the Empire had made. This reflection was vital. Knowledge, they realized, was as important as power. By studying the enemy's reactions, the humans learned how fear and uncertainty could be used strategically. They understood that even the largest, most disciplined forces could be destabilized by intelligence, planning, and unpredictability. This insight would guide them in future conflicts and help them maintain their edge in a galaxy full of unknown dangers. The psychological effects of victory were profound. The humans had survived impossible odds and emerged victorious. Confidence among the crew soared, but they also recognized the weight of responsibility. They had proven that a small, unrecorded group could defeat the mightiest fleet in the galaxy, and with this knowledge came awareness of the influence they now held. Every decision they made, every action they took, could have consequences far beyond their immediate environment. They were no longer simply survivors. They were leaders, strategists, and symbols of possibility in a universe dominated by giants. As they navigated through the aftermath, the humans also considered the Empire itself. The once mighty force was in disarray, its fleets shattered, and commanders demoralized. While some humans felt triumph, others reflected on the cost of such battles. War, even when necessary for survival, brought destruction, fear, and loss. They had targeted Imperial ships to defend themselves and assert their place in the galaxy, but the scale of the devastation was immense. The crew understood that power came with responsibility, and that true strength lay not only in winning battles but in knowing when and how to exercise it wisely. Communication among the crew remained crucial. Even after victory, the humans maintained tight coordination, sharing observations, repairs, and tactical insights. Each person contributed their expertise, ensuring that the fleet operated as a cohesive unit. Trust, which had been essential during the battle, continued to serve as the foundation of their operations. Every decision was made with the collective good in mind, reinforcing the unity that had allowed them to succeed in the first place. This unity, more than any technology or strategy, was their greatest advantage. The victory also had broader implications. The humans had been invisible to records, unknown to the Empire, and underestimated by every observer. Now their actions would be remembered, their existence recognized, and their capabilities feared. They had rewritten the rules of engagement in the galaxy, demonstrating that intelligence, strategy, and courage could rival size and power. Other civilizations, allies, and even potential enemies would take note of this unprecedented feat. The humans had left an indelible mark, not only on the Empire but on the perception of what unrecorded, underestimated forces could accomplish. In the farthest corners of the galaxy, far beyond the well-mapped star systems and Imperial spaceports, a small group of humans existed that no one had ever recorded. They were explorers, adventurers, and survivalists all rolled into one. The Galactic Empire, with its endless bureaucracy, star charts, and records, had never noticed them. On official maps, they didn't exist. To the Empire, they were nothing more than whispers of old legends, like stories told to scare children about the vast unknown. But in reality, they were real and they were alive and ready to prove their strength. These humans were not part of any government or organization. They didn't have official identification numbers, fleet registrations, or even a proper home planet that could be traced. They lived on the edges in places too small, too remote, or too strange for the Empire to bother with. Their ships were few and modest, nothing compared to the massive warships that patrolled Imperial space. Yet what they lacked in size and firepower, they more than made up for in determination, ingenuity, and courage. Every member of their crew had a reason to be there. Some were scientists curious about the universe. Others were engineers, inventors, or ex-soldiers seeking a life away from imperial control. But all shared a common goal: survival and exploration in a galaxy that did not notice them. The crew had learned early on that being invisible was both a blessing and a curse. They could move without being tracked, explore systems without alarms, and live freely. No imperial officers ever knocked on their doors or demanded their identification. Yet, this invisibility also meant that help was never coming if things went wrong. If a ship broke down or a star system turned out to be dangerous, they were completely on their own. Every decision carried risk, and every choice could mean life or death. But the crew embraced this freedom. They thrived in it. They had to. Their ships, while modest, were marvels of human creativity. Each vessel was built, repaired, and upgraded with hands-on skill and careful thought. They didn't have access to imperial technology, so they had to rely on clever designs, hidden compartments, and unconventional propulsion systems. Every engine, shield, and weapon system had been modified to maximize efficiency while staying small and stealthy. Their fleet was a patchwork of old and new, of borrowed parts and custom builds. Yet it worked. And it worked brilliantly. The humans' ability to adapt quickly to any situation gave them an edge no one expected, especially an enemy that thought power lay in sheer numbers and size. Life among these humans was also defined by community. Everyone had a role and everyone had a responsibility. Trust was not just a virtue, it was survival. The crew lived closely together, sharing spaces no larger than a few rooms in some cases, but their bond was strong. They celebrated small victories, like fixing a failing engine or discovering a safe planet for refueling. And they mourned losses quietly, knowing that dwelling on fear would only make them weaker. They learned to read each other's expressions, anticipate actions, and communicate silently when necessary. Every member of the crew knew that, out here in the invisible corners of the galaxy, mistakes were costly and cooperation was everything. Even with all their precautions, the humans had a certain thrill in being unseen. They could watch the Empire's massive fleets move through space without being noticed. They could witness grand battles and conflicts in distant sectors without intervention. To outsiders, it might have seemed like hiding, like fear, but in truth, it was a calculated choice. Remaining invisible allowed them to grow, learn, and prepare for something bigger. They were like shadows in the night, silent, observant, and patient. And patience would be their secret weapon. The galaxy itself was a vast, beautiful, and often dangerous place. Nebulas glowed like oceans of color, asteroid belts floated silently in the void, and rogue planets drifted without stars. The humans explored all of it, often finding strange life forms, rare minerals, and mysterious ruins left by civilizations long gone. Each discovery strengthened their knowledge, their skills, and their confidence. They learned to adapt to extreme conditions. Frozen planets where engines froze, volcanic worlds where heat melted metal, and radiation zones that would have killed any ordinary crew. Over time, their reputation grew, not among the Empire, which still had no record of them, but among themselves. They understood that survival was more than luck. It was preparation, skill, and courage. Despite all this, the humans were not perfect. They argued, they made mistakes, and sometimes their confidence led them into dangerous situations. But every challenge only made them smarter, faster, and more prepared for what lay ahead. They had no guidance from the Empire, no instructions, and no safety nets. Everything depended on them, and this made them strong in a way that large, powerful fleets controlled by bureaucrats could never understand. In the end, the Invisible Ones were a paradox. Small but mighty, unnoticed but formidable ordinary humans who had learned to survive in extraordinary ways. The Galactic Empire may have had its massive fleets, its extensive records, and its authority, but the humans had something that no imperial database could ever measure: ingenuity, courage, and the freedom that came from being invisible. And though the Empire did not know it yet, these invisible humans were about to change everything. Life had always been unpredictable for the invisible human crew, but they thrived on it. Every day brought a new challenge, a new world to explore, or a new problem to solve. They were experts in the art of survival, careful planners, and fearless adventurers. Yet, nothing could have prepared them for the day they first discovered a threat coming their way. A threat that belonged to a force far larger, more powerful, and far more organized than anything they had encountered before. The Galactic Empire. It started with subtle warnings, almost imperceptible at first. The crew was scanning nearby star systems, mapping potential resource-rich planets, when their sensors picked up unusual energy readings. Massive ships, unlike anything they had seen, were moving deliberately through space. These ships didn't belong to any group they had ever heard of. They were fast, precise, and heavily armored. At first, the humans hesitated. Should they approach? Should they retreat? The Empire was known for ruthlessness, and encountering a fleet of this scale was dangerous. But curiosity, tempered by caution, guided them. They observed quietly, keeping their distance, hiding in asteroid belts and behind unlit planets. As they watched, it became clear that these ships were not simply passing through. They were hunting. The fleet moved in tight formation, scanning star systems methodically as if searching for something or someone. The humans quickly realized the terrifying truth. The Empire had no record of them, yet it was sending its mightiest forces toward their sector. No official notice, no warnings in interstellar databases, not even a hint in galactic records. It was as if the humans didn't exist, and yet, the Empire acted as if they were the most dangerous threat in the galaxy.